Hello and welcome to Profiles and Issues, the Westchester Cable talk show that gives you in-depth interviews with prominent people in the news on important community topics. I'm your host, Dennis Rudin. Our topic for this broadcast, the 2019 Westchester County budget, a $1.9 to $1.94 billion budget with a 2% property tax levy increase for residents based on the assumption, and remember I repeat that word, assumption, that the Latimer administration can transfer parking lots for the Westchester County Center on parkland in White Plains to a public entity called the Westchester Local Development Corporation to raise an estimated $22 million to balance the budget with the permission of the New York State Legislature. Is this budget presented by the Latimer administration and approved by 13 Democratic county legislators an accurate and responsible appraisal of future revenues and expenditures for the county in 2019? To help us better understand the 2019 county budget, the process, and determine its credibility, I have invited a distinguished journalist and investigative reporter, Mark Lungariello, who covers the county executive and county government, to be my guest for the broadcast. Mark writes for the Journal News and LoHud.com about government and politics. Mark has also been associated with the Westchester and Fairfield County Business Journal as a contributor, a digital editor for West Fair Business Publications, and editor-in-chief of Hometown Media Group. He received his master's degree from Columbia University School of Journalism and a Bachelor of Arts from Manhattanville College. Mark, welcome to Profiles and Issues, and thank you for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Mark, you also co-host a weekly radio program on WVOX 1460 AM on the dial. Is that correct?
That's right. High noon.
High noon.
High
well,
noon.
Because it's between, what, 12 and 1, right?
It's 12 to 1, so it starts at noon, hence the name. It's not a clever name.
I think so. I think it is. Tell us a little bit about the format.
So I co-host High Noon with Phil Reisman, who may be known to local readers. He's a columnist for Westchester Magazine and spent close to 4 decades with the Journal News and its predecessors as a columnist mainly. So Phil and I co-host, and we have different guests on politics and other news issues, and sometimes it's just an open format where we take calls from listeners.
2 questions. First of all, what day is it on, or is it on all week? And second of all, if you could give us the phone number, we'll try to put it on a font also.
Sure. It's we're on every Thursday from 12 to noon, and that is on WVOX 1460 AM on your radio dial in the Westchester New Rochelle region, and also WVOX.com. And of course, if you want to call in, I assume you'll tune in before you call in and see what the topic is, but 914-636-0110, that's 914-636-0110. So every Thursday, 12 to noon, high noon, easy to remember. Phil Reisman, Mark Lungariello.
Terrific. And since we're plugging shows, we're on Thursday also, but not between 12 and noon. That's exclusive for Mark. We're on at 10 a.m., we're on at 4 p.m. and 9 p.m. here on Cablevision and Fios in the Greenberg area, and we're throughout Westchester County. You're going to have to check your cable calendar listings for the days that we're on. So since we've got all of those things on, okay, now we can get to the topic at hand. Okay, Mark, what is your view on County Executive Latimer's budget plan to increase the property tax levy by only 2% when it relies on the $22 million sale to a public utility called the Westchester Local Development Corporation to offset the outstanding debt?
So this parking lot sale, or proposed parking lot sale, is very interesting. And by the way, George Latimer proposed $22 million as revenue from the sale of this deal, but the county legislator, the lawmakers, actually increased that amount by $1 million. So they're now anticipating an estimated $23 million.
Oh, that's where I got my...
Right, so
okay.
23, George Latimer's original budget presentation was $22 million. That kind of goes to your initial point, which is that it's an estimate, it's a proposal. We haven't seen an appraisal of the land done, we haven't seen a term sheet, and when I say we, I don't just mean you and I mean the county legislators. So it's really speculative revenue. And the reason why the county executive took some heat for that, from particularly the few Republican lawmakers still left on the legislature, was because that was a lot of what the previous administration took heat for, and that's Rob Astorino, Republican Rob Astorino, who George Latimer defeated in last year's election. He used anticipated revenue from the airport deal that never got done. So now you have the same situation with the Westchester County Center parking lots. Will this get done? Will there be an appraisal? Will this deal go through? Will the state legislature sign off on it? Will there be litigation? There are a number of questions, to the point where I think it's accurate to say that it's not only a complex deal, it's a tangled deal. There's a lot of approvals that need to take place. And by Latimer's own admission, this won't be taken up until July of next year.
So how are you going to pay for these things if they're not going to be, if you're not going to first meet with the state legislature until July? In other words, when do the bills, because you have more experience in covering the budget, when do the bills have to be paid periodically through the year, or just by the end of the year?
Well, they have to pay them through the end of the year, but the books won't be closed on 2019 until probably midway through 2020. So what's interesting about that is we have a county executive now in a legislature that are on record saying they're looking for non-property tax sources of revenue. What does that mean? Well, simply, they had a plan that didn't get come to fruition, but it will resurface in 2019, to install red light cameras. They catch the people going through the red lights, they snap a photo of you, and they mail you the ticket. That will generate revenue for the county. We don't know how much, because we don't know how many cameras, we don't know what their anticipated income is. Also, there is talk that they're going to request from the state legislature an increase in sales tax.
Yeah.
So you and I will be paying more when we go to the store and we shop, but that offsets the need to increase the property tax revenue. Well, why is this important? It's very simple, right? If the county legislature gets the approvals for these other revenues, there's also talk about marijuana legalization and all that, there will be enough income just from the increase in the sales tax that the property tax will be covered. In other words, that deal may never have to be signed. If George Latimer gets more than $23 million from an increase in sales tax, he won't need to do this parking lot deal. And I think that the lawmakers, this is kind of what they're banking on. This money comes through, and if that money comes through, we don't need to ever pursue this tangled deal to do the county center transfer.
All right. Now let me ask you some follow-up questions, although you answered a lot of them already. Have you spoken to members of the Westchester State Legislative delegation about whether they are willing to vote in favor of giving authority to the county to sell parkland?
Well, here's another interesting aspect of this very complex deal. The administration, George Latimer's administration, does not believe it needs state legislative approval. They believe there's an existing law that exempts Westchester County. Usually when you decommission parkland, obviously you need state legislative approval. They don't believe that they need the state legislative approval. If it does have to go to the state legislature for approval, it becomes even, much more complex, because not only do you have park advocates, but you also have to convince people from outside of the immediate area that maybe this is a good idea. And does it set a precedent? This is one thing that we've talked about quite a bit in our coverage of it. Even if George Latimer does not intend to change the usage of this parcel from being a parking lot, it'll be a parking lot tomorrow, he's said. But does it set a precedent for a future county executive or future body, legislative body, to say, we're going to decommission parkland and without state legislative approval? So I guess the really roundabout way of answering that question is, we don't know yet, even if there is legislative approval, until we look at the deal. I don't know how much the legislators could even chime in on if they're going to support Westchester County's plan or not.
This is very controversial, wouldn't you agree? I mean, so why is he throwing this out now with his first budget? And the fact that I believe originally when he took office, he inherited, what, a $39 million shortfall from the Astorino administration. Plus, there was a cut in funding from the federal government, and that property tax over $10,000. All that's going to hit. So why do you think, have you had the opportunity to talk to him and get inside his head, why is he bringing up such a controversial issue now when there is the possibility that he could get it all done by just passing, by getting the state legislature or by challenging certain laws to just pass a additional tax revenues?
I think that the additional tax revenues have to hit in 2019, so it's tough to put them in the budget in any significant way without having the approvals. I think it's a really easy question to answer, right? George Latimer didn't want to hit a huge property tax increase on his first budget. I'm sure the legislative body in the county did not want to put a huge tax increase. This was an argument between Republicans and Democrats in the elections last year. All of 17 legislators in Westchester County will be up for election in 2019. They'll be running on this budget. So if they had come out with a 7% property tax increase, particularly after several years of Rob Astorino was county executive for 8 years, and in 7 of those years, the property tax was either kept even or reduced. It was actually reduced in the first year. So if they came out and hit a 7% tax increase, I think there would have been a lot of pushback. So George Latimer employed this deal, used this deal, and also other measures such as borrowing for tax certiorari payments. Those corporate back tax settlements, $8.5 million in the budget to borrow for that. A pension smoothing plan through the state government that lets you defer some payments to your pension obligations. So anyway, these are all ways to try to reduce or at least minimize the amount that you have to increase the property tax. And that's really what George Latimer was at here. He's said before he didn't think it was a good idea, but it's an idea that he felt was necessary to keep the property tax increase at 2%.
All right, I just want to follow up one or two minor points. You don't have to spend a lot of time, and then we'll get into some other projects for supposedly generating revenue for the county. Does the local development corporation have to first amend its bylaws for the deal to go through?
It looks that way unless they form another corporation of some kind.
And how long does this process take? I mean, does it take months? Can they do it in weeks, days? Do you have any?
Well, it depends on if the corporation's board votes to even amend the bylaws, and there's a question of that. That's why they may have to form a whole new public entity.
All right.
Part of that tangled process.
Right. Now, you know that he's the county executive was a member of the state assembly and a state senator, and he is at least my perception following him as an observer, he's an astute politician. Do you think he has the gravitas to make the deals, to get it through?
That's a good question. He certainly has relationships with not only lawmakers and his former colleagues, but the governor. But I guess the question is really how the public reacts. Will they be, if they're looking for a 1% sales tax increase and they start getting calls from their constituents, will some people not be willing to vote for it? I think that we have to wait and see what the proposal is and how the public reacts.
One of the things I found observing George, he happened to be in the district where I had lived also when he was state senator, is that he's an inclusive type of person. As you know, he has an inclusive government, he has some Republicans there, and he reaches out to all groups and all people. You and I observed him at the BCW meeting, the Westchester Business Coalition. And so you know, so is this his way of salesmanship, so to speak, to get the public, to educate them, to make them see it his way, so to speak?
I think he's banking on that.
Transparency, I guess I'm trying.
Yes, I think he's banking on that. He certainly, talked about the budget process, and he's been very frank about how he felt that, he's said some of the principles in balancing this budget weren't part of his philosophy. So I think he's banking on people paying enough attention to say, well, we may not agree with some of the tactics in the budget, but we feel that the ship's headed in the right direction, and we trust that level of leadership. He's certainly banking on that. If it pays off over the next 3 years of his term, I think that's still a question, depending on how the economy is and everything like that.
Now, also, and you may have mentioned this but in case I missed it, has there been an appraisal on the land yet or not?
Not that I've seen, not that the lawmakers saw, and they increased that $1 million expected price without an appraisal.
Do you know how long that process takes? Because what I'm concerned about here is you have a lot of moving parts. It's like musical chairs. Am I right or wrong? You have a lot of moving parts, and you also have to get it done within a year. The dates and especially legislative bodies, they don't work quickly.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how long it takes. I don't think anyone does, and there's so many question marks. I mean, just look at some of the questions you've asked me. Does the local development corporation have to amend its bylaws? Does the state legislature need to approve it? There's so many questions about this, and this is why I don't think that I'm going out on a limb by saying that the lawmakers and George Latimer would prefer that the state approves an increase in sales tax and other revenues, and this deal never gets signed.
Okay. So, according to what you said, if he lobbies the state representatives to increase non-property tax revenues, such as county sales taxes on business and everything, he may not have to sell the parking lots. But how is that going to go with the public, especially increasing the county sales tax with local businesses in Westchester County? And we'll get into this, but like the Westchester Business Coalition, they're still pushing him about the public-private partnership, for the airport and other areas. Is this his plan B, or I mean, if this doesn't come to fruition, all these moving parts, do you think he might have to raise the property tax levy to 5%?
You mean in 2020? In 2020, or?
Well, what happens if he doesn't get the legislature to go along with all this?
There's, I think Westchester, generally speaking, don't quote me on this, but, I think it's like almost a full point below Rockland. There's some other counties in the areas outside of the city. Even if it were to go up a 0.5 percentage point, the auditors that Westchester County hired to look at the budget said something like, $75 million in additional income by raising it by a 0.5 percentage point. So is it possible that they don't go a full percentage point? Maybe they just give a 0.5 percentage point. Maybe they, but to your point, I do think the business community will push back on it. Whether it'll have an effect, I don't think so, because I think right now the county knows that it's going to have to pay for it one way or the other. It's either the property tax or the sales tax.
Okay. The county executive, as you know, worked in the business sector for a number of years before working in politics full-time. What is it about public-private partnerships that makes him so concerned about signing agreements? Example, the North 60 Biotech Center in Valhalla. I believe it's, $1.2 billion project. Bring thousands of jobs to Westchester. What is holding up the agreement? Do you know?
Well, I'll answer the first part of the question, which is he against public-private partnerships?
Okay.
I don't think that he's philosophically opposed to it, but I do think that a lot of his support base and people that helped him get elected were against these very specific public-private partnerships. Playland, the airport deal. And he's been a little hesitant to get involved with those, or at least sign off on them. And also, these were Rob Astorino initiatives. So I think part of what we'll see is that he's renegotiating. What's holding up the North 60 plan? Very short. The lease hasn't been signed.
But there's got to be a reason why. Have you heard any rumors? Because, you know, you're around people all the time.
So the developer wants to add housing, which was not part of the component. Originally it was lab space, retail space, that sort of thing. He wants to add housing there. And the lease has been signed. It's a 99-year lease. And George Latimer's administration is now wants to do a new appraisal and see, this is 60 acres of county property. Should we use it as a biotech center? So we're basically restarting the review process now. And if George Latimer is going to ultimately pursue that and re-sign that lease and re-up the deal, whether there's housing on it or not, I will say John Ferrari, the developer, they've told me they will sign the lease as is, meaning without any changes to it. And George Latimer is still not interested in that. The administration has not.
What does he want?
What does he want in that deal?
That deal is missing. Has he told the press or not?
No, he's said he's having it reviewed. It's a due diligence period where he gets the chance to hire consultants and.
But I mean, engineers. You don't think he's stalling on this? You think he's for the deal, right?
He has said on the record to me several times that he is in favor of the deal, but he's reviewing it. If there are people within the administration that aren't, or maybe pulling them in different directions, that's a possibility, because they have a deal, they have a lease right in front of them that they could put their signature on right now and worry about the details or any changes later. But they just have opted not to go that route.
Now, the future for Westchester County Airport. I attend various events from the Westchester Business Coalition Committee, and they, even though the election is over, and you know, and he had tremendous when George Latimer ran for county executive, he got a lot of votes from that area, and I was at those meetings, and people, residents don't usually show up on a hot summer night to go and testify at these meetings. And not only did they come in large numbers, but they were adamant about the fact that they did not want the airport to be expanded, and conservative areas like Harrison, who usually will vote, you know, pro-business and everything, they live near the airport when it comes to their homes. You know, I mean, I think that group was responsible for a large part of his big victory. Now, if you see it different, let me know, but in other words, I think that might be a future source of some revenue, but I don't think he's going to act on that because of the political implications. What do you think?
I think you're right in that he's not going to act on it unless the legislature, particularly lawmakers, come out and push the deal. He's pretty much said as much, right? A lot of his support group were those same people at that meeting, with the signs and everything. And to be fair, I do think that that's a small number of people outside of the area in the airport that hear the traffic overhead. I don't think if you get to the Hudson River side or up county that it's as much of an issue for people. But I do think that those are a lot of the people that helped get him elected. And I don't think that he's going to pursue that deal unless somebody, you know, from the legislature comes knocking on his door and convinces him otherwise.
And the other aspect, and you know, some people may be embarrassed to talk about it, but I'm not. Most of those areas, the people are high income, well-to-do. And I was talking to one leader, and she told me indirectly, you know, if that doesn't go, they have no, you know, they will take them to court. They'll take the county to court if they have to fight that, you know. So, okay, and how about the Playland situation? What's his story with that? Does he want that or not? And it's just getting a better deal.
He's said that he doesn't like this deal, but this contract is signed. So the issue there is, I think George Latimer is in the process of trying to renegotiate the terms of that deal. But the developer or the management company, Standard Amusements, is really going to have to sign off on that, or that could turn into some type of litigation. So I think what they're going to come out with is try to renegotiate some of the terms voluntarily and come out and say, we've made this deal our own and we're ready to pursue it as is.
Okay, we've only got a couple of minutes left. You've really been great in answering these questions. Appreciate that. The budget was passed by 13 Democratic county legislators. They all voted in favor of it. Okay, and they made a statement saying that they voted for the budget because it's a first step to restore long-term budget stability. How can this statement be true when Moody's, the credit rating service, lowered the county's rating from AAA to AA? Doesn't this affect the county's ability to borrow, to float bonds, etc.?
The reserve funds have been tapped. They're still relying on borrowing and one-shot revenues, and this parking lot deal that we've spoken about, that's in the budget. So we'll see what happens in 2019, but you know, if this is a budget that's righting the ship, I think it's early to say.
Okay, we got his current budget, 1.9 billion. Oh yes, increase in spending. He said some of it, and this is where this may earn him votes. He had to do county contracts, and he also said there was a decline in infrastructure. I know from my own personal experience, there was a bridge in Dobbs Ferry. I forget the name of that bridge. It just remained, you know, they closed it down for a year before the election. And with regard to, so that's with infrastructure. And how much of the bill, he raised county raises, which is 39 million, but how do you operate if employees, you know, aren't being paid? You think that could swing support for him?
Yes, and I think you'll see the county staff being replenished a bit over the coming years. Certainly they're taking on more infrastructure projects.
Mark, I want to thank you very much for coming on the show. All of our programs can be seen on our website online at www.thedennisrudenshow.com or www.profilesandissues.com. Please email your comments about the program to profile.issue@yahoo.com. My guest has been investigative reporter Mark Lungariello for the Journal News and LoHug.com. This is Dennis Rudin saying so long for Profiles and Issues.